Man, that sounds good, huh? It's been a couple weeks.
It's like old times, man. Yes,
I
sir.
love that.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking for an intro today, right? We're going to talk about we're with our buddy today. He's not allowed to talk yet. We're giving him an introduction. Man, you know, like we could talk about forced performance. We could talk about amateur hockey player. We could talk about dad. We could talk father, and we're going to get into all that. But I can't. And if you guys watch this, then you know I'm on my phone right now because I can't get past these like 500-pound one-legged lunges.
Insane shit.
Which is why he's on the fucking podcast in the first place, right? Because it's not that he's good looking. It's not that he's an awesome father. It's not that he's a good buddy of our good buddies over at First Form. None of that stuff. It's literally like I was talking with him a couple weeks ago, right? And I shared one of his stories. And as I'm sharing this story, I think I was on the shitter, right? That's when I look at like dudes. I'm on the pooper.
Sure.
And I'm watching this and I'm like, the fuck is he doing? And it's so good and it's so strong and he's never hurt. And part of me was like, man, can this dude just tap out for a week? Just come on. Not one hernia, not a quad pull.
And Will says like 500-pound single leg squats. He
literally
literally
means
means that.
We're gonna post some links with the podcast so you guys can check it out.
Yeah.
But it's our good buddy Brock Wilson.
That's right.
He's we met this guy through Sal and Annie Frisella over at First Form. Hit it off, and what was really cool. And he might not even think this, but, you know, he's got, you know, with Brock being over there at First Form and training being friends of theirs, it wasn't even a big deal. Like the guy, like when I met him, asked me more questions about me and was just more interested in like who I was all like, just, hey, what are you all about? What are you guys into? And was just asking questions and just made you feel important, which is really cool. Because a lot of guys we've met that are friends of, you know, influencers or famous people, like then they tend to make it more about themselves. And I guess you can call them like roadies or like the show Entourage, right?
Sure.
When you watch a show like Entourage, like the main character is usually not the most outspoken.
Right.
It's like the entourage around him, making sure that everyone knows, like, I'm this dude's pal. Like,
they're part of the entourage.
Fucking right? None of that.
Yep.
None. Just questions and more interested in me and why I was on the, you know, we were out there to be on the show. And, you just felt like the dude was present, you know, and then like he's got some scars. So people have scars. We speak. There's an energy to that. And you just kind of like, man, good vibe to him. And he kind of dove into his story and stuff, but just a really intriguing guy. One of the most impressive guys I've ever seen perform, yet does it every day like it's not a big deal. I also fucking hate that. Because I'm like, listen to me. I don't do a quarter of what you do. It is a big deal, you know, but he doesn't make it a big deal. He just gets after it. He takes care of his athletes over at Force Performance out of St. Louis. We're going to put his handles and everything else. But long story long, it's our buddy Brock on the show today. Brock, what's up, brother?
What's up, bro?
Well, first of all, not good looking. I mean, that's a little extreme. I mean,
of course, good looking guys always say that.
My mom told me I was fucking handsome, so that's first and foremost.
Yep. Well, we don't know. You got an awesome beard, so you're either good looking or you're covering some shit up.
I'm covering a lot of shit up, especially my bald head, so I had to fucking grow something. At least I got a little bit of hair left.
Awesome, man. And man, it's gonna be fun diving into your story and just, you know, kind of like with Day $1 the whole synopsis behind that, right, is like when we first started that podcast, it was literally talking about our literal day $1. And it doesn't just have to be literal in business. It can be both. It can be your life, you know, rock bottom, your life, you know, just starting point or starting over point. And when we were first starting this podcast, I was just out of mind. I'd left a company, sold all my shit off. I'm sleeping in my buddy's mom's old Y2K pantry, studying for real estate. Like, you know, and that was my literal, you know, start over, but it's also my literal day one and $0 of real estate. And I started using that hashtag. I started making it public on Instagram, what I was doing, because I never wanted to document shit once I made it. I always wanted to show, man, the start and just give other people permission to do the same. But just to give, before we dive into your story and your actual literal day $1, would love a little context for the audience on what you own, what you do, where it's at, and just some current event type of stuff as far as like where they can find you and what you're all about and what you're doing.
You know, my wife and I, we started a gym about a year ago here in St. Louis. We called First Performance. We do group training. I do strength conditioning. I work with a ton of athletes here in St. Louis, whether it be NFL, NHL. I work with a lot of college athletes. Been doing this a long time. we made a decision about a year ago again, and like I said, we opened up this gym, and it's just taken off here in St. Louis. Previous to that, we did a lot of the online training, and we realized like the ability to do that and what it had, and we wanted to bring that. Everybody kept asking like, well, when are you guys going to open up a gym? When are you going to open up a gym? And year ago to date, we opened up this gym, and it's just been full throttle ever since. So it's pretty amazing. The facility is first class in its own. We knew going into this, it was about the details, like details and community. First and foremost, you got to build a spot that people are going to go to, and that's what we did. We took everything we've seen, we've enjoyed, and we pretty much built a gym for ourselves, like somewhere that we would enjoy training. And then going from that, the second step of that was building a community. And that starts with, like, again, day one. We knew first and foremost what we wanted here. We wanted to build a really tight-knit community, a family-type community. And we've been able to do that. So here, owning a gym, being a strength coach, I got my personal training, my general population clients, being a father, being a husband, and just trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. And just kind of getting back into your story, man, like, did you grow up in St. Louis?
I grew up here. I was born here in St. Louis. I grew up here in Canada, but my dad played here in St. Louis for the Blues. He played here in St. Louis. He was a longtime Blue. He played in Chicago as well. So I lived pretty much in the season. We lived here, and then we'd go back to Canada. We lived in Austria for a year when he played over in Austria. Lived in Italy. So I did a lot of traveling growing up. It was fun. Like, he was my best friend. I was at the rinks all the time. Had a lot of great relationships with a lot of players, and I think probably about 16 years old, I moved back to Canada, played some junior hockey in Canada for 4 years. And then I went to Boston, played college hockey in Boston at a school called Merrimack, and then played a little bit of minor pro, and then bounced around. I was in pretty much every state I covered. It was pretty much a suitcase. I traveled a lot of different cities and bounced around and played some actually really cool cities, built a lot of cool relationships. And then I ended up back in St. Louis. My dad had a gym here in St. Louis. He retired here, and he was the gym guy. That's where I get it from. And retired here in St. Louis, opened up the gym, and that's where our family stayed. And every summer I would come back here, and ended up staying here when I retired. So
only fights that are better than hockey fights are hockey players that play for Boston, that live in Boston, that go to the bar on the weekend and bar from any crazy bar fights in Boston. Being a hockey player, man.
You know what, man? I'm not a big like I'll stand my ground, but I don't look for that shit. Like I did it enough when I was playing. I was a scrappy little player. I wasn't great. Like I wasn't. My dad first round pick in the NHL, like stud athlete. Wow. I hear it all the time. People always tell me like, man, you're supposed to skip the generation. I'm like, yeah, thanks a lot. Like, fuck yeah, I get it. I get it. I'm not that good. So I was a team guy, man. I went out, I fought, did whatever I needed to do to help the team. And my dad always told me, he's like, make sure every game you get on the stat sheet. Well, most of the time it wasn't points, so I had to do something. So it was either knock somebody on their ass or fight them. So
you're like the enforcer.
Make sure yeah, so I got enough of that. Like I said, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I was more like, even though like the life of the party guy, like even at the bars and stuff, I just enjoyed having a good time, enjoying meeting people, talking to people. I was one of those guys. Now, if something happened, I was always had somebody's back, but I was never out looking for fights, and that was just never my forte.
Not even in Boston, huh? You didn't have to get crazy.
No, because the guys in Boston, you know what? Like, you get in a bar fight in the bar, you got 20 guys waiting out. We're outside the bar. I'm smarter than that. I like I know my surroundings. I
was hoping for like I met Joe Rogan 25 years ago. He pulled me out of a bar fight.
I know all those guys in Boston, right? I'm smarter than that. I enjoy this.
That's awesome, man.
Guys out there.
You know what's fun about entrepreneurship, man, is like as fun as it is to like play and do that, at some point that ends. Like at some point, right? Like you're too old and you cannot compete at a high level and you're no longer able to do it. And then a lot of guys kind of like struggle with some identity. It's the same like on the military side. A lot of guys from that world, especially guys that get to a high level into special operations and and then physically you just can't do it anymore. They kind of struggle a little bit as well. But like what's fun about business is you don't ever have to stop doing this. You know what I mean? And even when you stop like one-legged 500-pound shit you do, right? One day when you get back down to this planet where everyone else works out, right? Like you're still able to critique and coach and influence other trainers and athletes. And as your business grows, you're able to just allow that to grow to who knows what that looks like, man. Like maybe you're running the country one day with who knows, like whatever your goals are. But it's really cool because a lot of us that have gone through transitions and have a hard time, once you figure out that entrepreneurship and business, I mean, look at Warren Buffett, dude's in his 90s, right? Yeah. Still getting his fucking English muffin and his orange juice, still crushing, setting trends. And like, it's really cool because it's like, man, like we never have to stop doing this per se. which is
Yeah,
awesome.
well,
It allows you to like just regrow, reattach, re-identify into something.
Well, I think that's a big part too, is like you said, re-identifying. Like once you're done, like you're an athlete, right? Then that's one thing I struggle with. Like you're known as an athlete, whether it be a hockey player, football player, and that's your identity, right? And when that's done, it's extremely hard. That you talk about depression, you talk about a lot of guys struggling. It's recreating themselves. And sadly enough, there's a lot of guys, they either commit suicide or they're still struggling. Like I see some of these ex-hockey players or just ex-athletes still out the bar, still trying to live that life, and they've not been able to move on from that identity. They're still hanging on to it.
Especially in hockey, right? Because you've got like, and this is no disrespect to hockey.
Bad.
I love hockey. No disrespect to hockey, but in hockey, you don't have, like you look at baseball, you look at basketball, man, if you're an all-star or above, you're pretty famous, and you can at least take your fame and project it into something outside of athletics and try to do something. Like a lot of hockey players just aren't known. You might know, like the average folk might know 1 to 2 players in all of hockey.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a harder world to come out of, right? That's a rough, tough, no bullshit kind of sport, but especially like here in the States, like it's not necessarily so readily identifiable. Like, dude, I couldn't even name one player from the Avalanche.
Well, it's hard.
Right?
I think again, it's a big market sport, but it's not, right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things. Like you look at the payrolls, you look at the dynamics. Like even guys, like when they're playing, as much money as they make, I mean, the high end guys, they might make enough to live off of at the end of the day and sustain that lifestyle. But a majority of the guys, like you better be investing your money. You better be able to create these relationships and build something in the community, because a lot of these guys, again, they don't have much after. Like I look at my dad, man, like granted he played back in the day, but like he had nothing when he retired, like nothing.
Yeah.
Like he literally was dirt poor. He hardly had any money to do anything. Like, and at the end of the day, I remember him at one point dressing up in a suit, and he was trying to get a job as a car salesman. Like, and that's literally like years after, like 1 or 2 years right after his career. So like, again, there's not much there. So like,
wow,
when you're looking at the higher end athletes, they're very recognized. It's easier for them to get other jobs, to have investments and things like that. But like at the end of the day, hockey, it's not like that. Like the pay is not as good as people think it is. And like, you look at these big contracts that some of these guys are getting, well, a majority of that's taken off for taxes, especially the guys playing in Canada. So you have to be smart with your money, or you have to be a freaking good salesman to yourself.
That's gotta be somewhat part of like why hockey's so fun to watch it, right? Like when you see these guys play, they just fucking get after it. And then you find out like what the pay is like, and it's like, look, you gotta love it to be doing it. Cause like you could be in real estate making significantly more money, right? Like, but it kind of like keeps the game pure, like for love of the game. And like, you gotta be getting after it and loving it if you're going to do it, versus like you look at baseball, basketball, I don't know about football, maybe not, but like there are some sports, man, where like guys kind of transcend above it with money. And then you got basketball players that like don't even play defense anymore, and they brag about it. And it's just like, man, is there like so much, because you're like a billionaire now, that like, it's like you've won. Like there's just, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but kind of getting back into it, man. Like you talk about playing for a while, no longer playing. Was there like a day $1 for you as far as like transitioning out of sports, or just anything difficult in life that you kind of had to like go through and transcend from before you got to your day $1 in business?
Yeah. I mean, shit, man, I went through a lot. I mean, if we're going to open up Pandora's box, you guys got some time here. Yeah. We can start there. I mean, like my day $1, like, growing up playing hockey, being around the game, that was my identity, hockey player. And, the tough thing as a hockey player, like, again, the careers aren't that long. And for me, it's, again, you say these guys move balls to the wall. Well, like, they also move balls to the wall off the ice, and like they go hard, right? So that was kind of the culture that I was around. So, we always enjoyed ourselves and playing and all that stuff. So like when the time came for me to retire, luckily my dad had a gym in St. Louis. I loved coaching, and I started doing that every summer. I would come back home and I would train kids at my dad's gym. So I started making some money. I started making more money during the off season than I was getting paid in season.
Wow.
So that's one of the reasons, like I fell out of love with the game. Like I was grinding in the minors. I was fighting guys that were 10 times my size. I knew I wasn't going to make it to the NHL. And at some point, I remember being in the locker room. I remember looking across, and I had a guy in my locker room. He was like 34 years old. He has wife and kids. And we're playing in the minors. Like we're talking living in small apartments, year to year, worrying about his contract, making ends meet. I'm like, I don't want that to be me. Like, I don't know really necessarily where I'm going to be in life. And like, I was already unhappy with who I was as it is. And remember that defining moment. I was like, this just isn't me anymore. So I'll never forget, I was going to retire. My cousin, he was playing over in England that next year, and he was begging me to come, just play one more year, have fun. It's going to be a fun year. So that was it. I was like, all right, I'll go over there. We ended up winning the championship that year, and that was the year I retired. Well, going into that, it was a transition now. Then I became a coach. I was a full-time coach, and like, it was great, man. It's that excitement. That first year or so, like, it was fun, man. It was a really exciting thing. Like, I had a new transition. Our teams were unreal. We had it was like the year we had like 5 first-round draft picks out of St. Louis from our team, especially like that was our team. So we were like number 2 in the country. We had won a bunch of championships. So that was fun for me. Well, then the reality set in is like, am I really happy in life? Am I happy with myself? Like, I'm going out all the time. Like, it was just like, I was still trying to maintain the hockey persona because I didn't really necessarily know who I was just yet. Then I lost my dad. So it was probably a few years after I retired. I lost my dad about 6 years ago. He was my best friend. And that's like where all these things going up to that moment in my life, whether it be, the partying, the going all in, like, I could mask that type of shit. I could live a normal life. And then as soon as that happened, like, that's where it all turned for me. Like, we're talking like substance abuse. Like, I was doing blow every weekend. Like, I was drinking nonstop. It was women. It was this. And like, I just wanted to numb everything I was feeling. That went on for about 2 years. It was really bad. I had to get out of St. Louis. Like, I just could not do it anymore. We lost the business in the transition because of a lot of different legal things. So I ran. I ran from St. Louis. I ran from everything. I went up to Canada for about a year and a half. That didn't work. Like, it caught up to me there. The sadness was still there. I was depressed. So then I came back to St. Louis. I moved down to Florida for a few months, and I'll never forget. Still going out, still partying, and it got into the point to where I was so depressed. I hated myself. I was beating myself up. I didn't want to live anymore. It was like something that consumed my life. And like, when I say consume my life, well, it was like every day I woke up, it was a thought. Like, I was thinking that day, like, how am I going to kill myself? Like, I do not want to live anymore. Like, it got deep, and that went on for probably like 2 months. And then finally, I was like, that's it, I'm done. I'll never forget it. I planned a trip down to Fort Myers, Florida. I planned a trip down there. I'd never seen anywhere as beautiful as that. We never traveled as a family. Like, it was always hockey and all that. I traveled down to Fort Myers, Florida. And then from Fort Myers, I went down to, Key West. Sorry, it was Key West. Went down there for a few days, and then I came home. And when I came home, that was when I was going to do it. I'd said my goodbyes to everybody, just saw my family members. And I'll never forget, I woke up that day and was like, this is the day. And I went down to the basement. I was at my mom's at the time. I went down to her basement, and I tied a rope, and I tried to hang myself. And I'll never forget, I woke up and I just started losing my mind, just bawling my eyes out. And this is how bad it was for me at that time. I got up and I tried to do it again. And the rope had came out. I got up, tried to do it again, and the rope broke. But I woke up in my own puke and piss. And that was the moment where I sat on the ground. I had a rope hanging from my neck, and I just started bawling. And I picked up the phone. I called the police, and I said, I need help. And I spent 12 days in a facility going through everything you could ever go through. Evaluations, talking to people. And I would never forget this. I just remember being in the room, and you always think about people who are struggling and like, those people are crazy. That, that's just extreme and all that. And I realized, like, from hearing all these stories from all these people, like, I was the one who tried. Like, these people said they were going to do something to themselves. They were talking about it. Like, I actually fucking did it. And not only did I try to do it, I tried to do it twice. Like, and at that moment in my life, it was a humbling moment. It was a coming to life moment. Like, and I knew at that point when I had called the cops that I wanted to live, like, or I would have fucking done it. And sitting there, and then from that moment on, it was like a slow progression. I started to feel better a little bit. They got me back into routines and started to get back into my everyday life. And all these great things started to happen again because I started taking care of myself. Well, I didn't really dig that deep into my demons and everything because it had been probably about 6 to 8 months. The Blues made the playoffs. I was pretty clean at the time. And I went out when the Blues made the playoffs, the Stanley Cup run, and I found myself downtown St. Louis one night. Ran into some people that, like old acquaintances, and got back into some bad shit for probably 2 weeks. And And at that time, I was actually at First Form, and I'll never forget. They ended up firing me, and when they fired me, I just started. I'd met my wife previous. She did a bunch of magazines. We could talk about her in a bit, but I'd met her, and I'll never forget that moment when I was like, you know what, I'm so done with this life. I'm tired of fighting it. I don't want to do this anymore. And that was the moment her and I just started to actually get together. And I'll never forget it. That was the day I got sober. And I've been sober for 2.5 years. From that moment on, from getting sober, it's been a continuous battle, becoming more healthier, mentally, physically, all of these things. From that moment on, her and I, we built a relationship. We built this online brand of BB Fitness that started doing really well. And again, started to create all these great relationships with people, started taking care of myself, and all these great things in my life started happening. I was surrounded by good people, like Sal and Andy Frisella, who have been in my corner since day one. I'll never forget, even when that moment they fired me, Andy and Sal both talked to me the next day. They said, hey, you got to be honest with yourself. You got to be honest with other people, and you got to make sure you're taking care of you. And the number one thing from that moment, for some reason, it just has stuck with me since that moment. It was the first time somebody showed, they care about me. And the fact that, like, listen, like, we believe in you, but like, we don't judge you. Like, we're not judging you, because we all go through these things. We all have these battles, but listen, you got to face them. Like, you got to stop running from whatever it is internally that you have. And from that conversation on, and then the next one, like I said, I've started building all these relationships again, started doing well. Sal, I'll never forget the conversations with Sal. With Britt and I, we'd always talked about doing a gym. We're having our 5-year plan, 10-year plan through COVID, everything, all that stuff. Everything had built. We had all this momentum, and it was just like, I was afraid. Like, I didn't want to do it. It was like just too much stress. I started making all these excuses. Well, then Sal called me in his office, and Sal has this way of having a conversation with you, of asking the hard questions. And his main thing was, why haven't you guys done it yet? Are you going to wait? You're going to wait 5 years? Like, and we had probably a 10-minute conversation. I walked out of his office, and I remember calling Brett after, but thinking to myself, I just made about 20 different excuses, bullshit excuses of why we shouldn't. And from that moment, I was like, called my wife. She'd been on it. She wanted to open up a gym. Called her. I said, you want to do this, huh? She goes, yep. That was the moment we decided we're going to open up a gym. And that was my day one right there.
That was your literal day $1 in business of like starting.
That was my day $1 in business, meeting my wife. And that moment where I got fired from First Form, that day that Andy and Sal called me, I made the decision when her and I decided that we were going to move forward, be together. That was the moment for me internally. That was my day one personally. And then the business one was that meeting after Sal. It was just like, all right, you know what? Why wait? You're making so many excuses.
Question for you on that. So when you're, and this is it could not be true. I don't know, but just when you're finally clean, right? And you're there, is there any like, fear of like not wanting to like rock the boat? Like, hey, I've got structure in my life. I've got good friends. Things are right where they need to be. I'm not stressing out.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to like, as you were embarking on doing the gym, it's like, hey, there's going to be added stress, added fear, added this. And like, hey, is that going to force me into like a relapse because that's how I cope at all? Yeah. Is there like a fear there with that of like, hey man, if I rock this boat, if I stress myself out too much, go too hot with risk versus like, trusting in yourself to just build other ways of like managing the new stress load of a gym. And I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm just curious of like, when folks finally work that hard to get clean, is there also that monkey on their back that like, hey, just don't rock the boat. They're like, I'm finally clean. I'm out of the clouds. I just need to keep it right here.
I think it wasn't the clean dynamic. It was like, for me, like once I made the decision to get sober, that was like the easy part for me. Like for me, it was the depression and the mental battles. Like for me, that's one of the biggest things that scared me, man. Like it has taken me so long to fight through all of this stuff. And her and I were in such a great place in our life. Like the BB Fit, the online stuff, man, we were killing it. Like every month, the challenges, all of these things were going so well. We were doing personal training at one of my friends' gyms here in St. Louis. Like we were in a great spot. Our relationship was great. We didn't have so much stress. Everything I had was manageable, right? And the biggest thing that scared me was the unmanageable, is like all these new things coming into my life. Like I'd finally, after like 35 years, man, and all these battles, like I finally found myself like in a good spot in life. Like I felt good about where I am,
And you don't want to lose
who
it
I
all,
was,
right?
and I didn't, dude. I was terrified to lose it. Like it was terrifying to me.
It's
'Cause
funny
I
you say
knew-
that, dude, because like we've talked to Sal as well with like business stuff and different things. We've talked to other guys ahead of us, and there's this commonality, right? Of like most people think, and it's not that this isn't true, but a lot of people at least know, hey, the literal day $1 the taking the leap and doing it, right, in business is like, hey, that's a significant time. That was a significant time for Eli and I, right? Like, and then we do it. The one that's never talked about until you are in this position, but then a lot of the bigger guys you admire that have really done it, they start talking about it, and Eli will remember this. It's the next leap of, hey, you've built some success and you've got money rolling in and you're comfortable and you're winning and it's there, and it's like, hey, but that's the false summit. That's the summit you got to get to see the real summit of possibility, but now you have everything to lose in your mind.
Yeah.
And then you stay there and you're going to be in third gear the rest of your fucking life versus, hey, this was actually the buildup to the real leap of now you're really going all in, motherfucker, right? And like, that's what we're doing now. And Eli, being the amazing business partner and Jewish guy, spends all of our fucking money. So he finds ways to spend our money, and bless his heart because he's great at it. But we just reached that, this year, and dude, we're doing well and we're cranking, and being on a Real AF podcast and all that stuff. But we've heard it from Sal, we've heard it from some other guys, and it's like, no, motherfuckers, you guys just got to the false summit to let you see the real one. But what was cool is realizing most people never get to the top of the false summit to actually see the big opportunity. They're still trying to climb this first part. They think that's the all in, and it's like, no, bro, it's just not, so it's interesting that that was yours. You guys are winning. You've built a business. You've got your friends back. You got healthy relationships. You're in a good place, and you're like, fuck, we're going to go all in and potentially lose it all, including what we've already built for the chance at this next thing. But man, typically when you're the right people doing that, it ends up being bigger than you could ever expect.
Well, that's the thing too. Like you talk about the fall summit, like when we started this, I'll never forget, like we were like, oh, we're going to open up a gym. We're going to open up a gym. We got a great community in St. Louis. We can really build something here. But then we're a year in.
COVID.
And what do you think happens?
COVID.
Well, then no, not even that. It's just like what we've been able to build. I'm like, holy shit. Like with what my wife is doing, and I'm going to say this, like she is so far ahead of the curve. She's teaching strength. She's taking sports performance dynamic into these group settings. All right. And I call it team training because she's doing something that's so far ahead of where this high intensity, the metabolic training, and all these gyms, these class basis things, the Orange Series and all this stuff. Like she's so far ahead of the curve in where she's at. She's getting people strong. She's teaching people the right way. Like you look at her, dude, she's a monster. She works her ass off. She eats right. She promotes this, but guess what? She can talk about it because she was that high intensity, eat less, eat low calories, and that whole thing. So now she's been able to do in this group setting, and she runs the group classes.
So she would have got my ass for that turkey. So that turkey Tom, that turkey Tom would have pissed her off, huh?
Oh yeah, she would have jumped on it. Like it's just funny, like seeing what she's been able to do. Well, like now we're like, holy shit, like we have something here. Like this isn't just like a one gym thing. Like we have the opportunity here to really do something beyond what we had originally planned. And that's the cool thing is like, we're going to hit that point where we're going to have to make a decision because we're not there yet. I'm a realist. Like we're getting there, but then we're going to have to make a decision. Like you said, you get comfortable, you start making money. And then it's like, well, do we go all in on that? Like that's the next step. And that's the real summit for us is like, okay, 1, 2, okay, we're going to go nationwide with this. Like, what can we do here? Because I truly believe like we have something special. It's early in the works, but my vision's been totally opened up by what she's been able to do and where the trend's heading. So,
and this is why business and entrepreneurship is so fun, because as you reach those summits, you have vision of the next, I kind of correlated to like driving in the dark. You can only see 300 feet in front of you with your headlights. But once you get 300 feet, you see 300 more feet and then 300 more feet. Right. And like a lot of people, they get stuck in these thoughts or procrastination. And it's like, hey, you're sitting in the parking lot of your work talking about how you think you're going to get home that's across town. And it's like, hey, you can sit in this parking lot, keep talking about it, but if you just pull out of the damn parking lot, you're going to see 300 feet in front of you. You're going to know when to merge on the highway. You're going to know when to take a left, when to take a right, when to stop, when to speed up based off of traffic, when to slow down, when to get off of the highway, because your headlights are exposing. But if you don't go out into, we'll call it the work of things, you're not going to see 300 feet. Like now it's just speculation. And then a lot of people just try to have this whole thing mapped out. Like a lot of people try to map out their business like you would map out driving from work to home. But you don't know if there's accidents on the road. You don't know if there's going to be a road closure. You don't know if you forget to pull off or to exit. So you got to go to the next, like whatever it is, like you don't know any of those things until you get out there. It's the same in business. Like stop bringing me this huge business plan or this is just you feeling productive, but really it's just a disguised form of procrastination. You just need the first 300 feet, a solid, like have great core values, have a quality product, be professional, know your shit. Those are things that you don't even get off the bench unless you have those. But then once you start, so many people try to have it all figured out. And it's like, but these summits that we're talking about today of like, hey, once you're here, oh, hey, now you see it. And I'm sure Eli and I, once we get to this big summit we're climbing right now, well, Murphy's Law, motherfucker, it's just going to show another one, right? And you're like, fuck,
you know it is.
There is no
Especially
end.
Knowing you guys, man.
But it's
like,
fun,
no
man. Yeah, but it keeps you stimulated. And the more we reach, the more impact we have on others to climb their summits. That's what's so cool is you start turning around and looking back. It's not so much about looking at all the summits we've climbed. It's looking at all the people on their first and second summits climbing. You know what I mean? And you're kind of leading the way. And like, that's where it gets really contagious. And that's where it just becomes bigger than you, man. And getting up and getting after it every day. I can't remember ever like, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on this too, Brock. I can't remember a day where like getting up and getting after it was like this conscious decision of like, oh, I don't want to do it, but you know, for my mom and for my kids and for, you know, and it's like, yeah, man, it's for all those things. Don't get me wrong, man. Like I want to be a cool dad. I want to be an influential dad. I want to teach my kids that it's bigger than you, man. Like it's about influence and different stuff, but I don't have these days where like, I just don't do shit. But then I remember what my mom told me before she died. And then it just throws a fucking rocket up my ass. And I'm kind of just this, man. Like, I don't know, but I do think that you pick up steam as you go, right? Because I know, like, now that Eli and I are in it, bro, getting after it every day now is more natural, more second nature than when I was, like, sleeping in a fucking pantry, doing Uber and Lyft at night, studying during the day. Like, those were conscious decisions. But then, man, as you build momentum and you start seeing, you know, just the work, the body of work, and you start seeing some successes and you're like, yo, man, I kind of got a little thing rolling right now. Like that momentum just rolls where like, I couldn't imagine not fucking getting after it, you know? Like, is there any truth to that for you, man? Like in the beginning, was it
absolutely.
conscious?
I think for me too, like I have to consciously, like in my own space, like there are days again, like I have a different form of it. Like there's days where I struggle. Like this year, everyone's like, oh, you guys are doing so well. Like, and on the hindsight of that, man, like we are in a beautiful place, but I fight like these demons every day. And like, I had these mental battles to where like, man, there's days where like, I can't get out of bed. Like there's days where it just builds up. Like this year where we talked about it, I was comfortable right before. I knew these battles were going to come. I didn't know they were going to be this, like this. And it's not the substance abuse. Again, it's that mental side of things because my life's been flipped upside down. I was comfortable. And unfortunately, in getting uncomfortable again, it's been about a year and it's been the hardest year of my life in the sense of like all these new things coming at me. Cause like I look at Britt and I, like, we're not like great business people. Like I don't know anything necessarily about business. You know what I know? Building relationships, being a good person, putting out a good product, just like all the things that you said. The biggest thing for me is building relationships and creating a community. Now, again, this last year, there's been days where I've not been able to get out of bed because again, I'm so overwhelmed and consumed by things that I deal with internally. Like I can't do it that day. The problem is, and where I've gotten better. And again, like you talk about 75 hard routine and all these things, like is for me, I've been able to shorten the length of how many days that extends. Like just recently on last week or 2 weeks ago, man, Tuesday hit, Christmas, all these things we've had going on. I was sick. I just, again, built a ton of momentum, and then I got sick. Then Britt got sick. Then Lucas, our son, got sick. And then, I was overwhelmed. It was Christmas. We hadn't gotten a tree yet. And Tuesday morning then hit. I woke up and I was like just crying. Britt's like, "Are you like, what's going on? Are you okay?" I'm like, she doesn't totally get it, but she tries her hardest, and God bless her. Like, she does everything she can to try and support me in this, but she doesn't understand it. So it's hard for her. So I try and help her, but then like I'm closed off. So like it was a Tuesday morning. I couldn't get out of bed. I'm like, Britt, I can't do today. I texted my clients, and thank God my clients are extremely great at, like, about understanding, like, cause I'm open. Like, that's the thing. When you're open about things, it's easier for you. So I text them, say, this is not a good day for me. But that night, halfway through the day, which is shortened for me, I was up, I got it in the shower, I walked around, I got outside a little bit. That next morning, Wednesday morning, man, I got back into my routine. I got up in the morning at 2:45. I jumped in the cold shower. I did my devotions and prayers. I did I read my 10 pages. I ate my breakfast, and it was a good day. For me, like, that's what awesome. I deal with, and that's what I endure. And like the biggest thing for me is not necessarily hold things accountable. I just know I got to get up. I got to get up because I have people counting on me. But I also need to do it for myself, because I gotta be able to count on myself to be the best I can for my family. And again, that's all starts with my routine. My routine is my number one thing in the morning.
Well, and people, people counting on you can also be its own level of stressor, right? Like it's honorable, it's motivating, it pushes you because it's bigger than yourself, but it's also its own stressor, man. And like, just leadership through the military, being in law enforcement, like a lot of people are counting on you to be proficient in a lot of dangerous situations. And then sometimes they can get so dangerous where, bad things can happen regardless of how good you are. Right. And like, that's just a difficult thing to come to terms with, period, because you always want it to work out perfect. But when kids are getting hurt or dying, it's really hard to like have a conversation with, hey man, there was just nothing more you could do. Yeah. Like that doesn't even resonate. Like when you kind of go through some of that, but it's an honorable thing to do, but it carries its own stressor. So it's good. Like when you talk about, you have to do things for you, because if it's only for others, that'll fucking bury you. Eventually it'll be overwhelming and it'll bury you. And, like, it's interesting though, like when you mention how you've mitigated the time in which it requires to get you back in the game, and pretty much how you've increased your capacity to just handle more with working on yourself. And that's so important for like entrepreneurs and business and life, just to understand, because we try to be so significant, so transcendent, so accomplished overnight. There just tends to be this like lack of grace or forgiveness to give oneself, to just have a day. And I've had, and like, it's good that you bring it up, because like Eli and I grind every day, and we're in a good zone, and like, and we're just fucking getting after it. And I also think that like, I'm just neurotic about shit. Right. So I'm trying to be fucking Michael Jordan and fucking everything. Right. Like Eli, dude, it's so funny, because we'll be talking in the office, and we'll talk about other like just big influencers in the real estate world, and like, hey man, these guys don't even fucking know. Like, they know us, they don't even know what we're doing. Like, they don't even fucking know. And man, hey, this dude said this, and like, and Eli's just like, yeah, man, but like, these guys aren't competing against us. And I'm like, no, fuck that.
No, it's more like it's more like
so you and I are very on the same page.
Like, no. Like
it's more like, not that we're not competing against them. It's more like, oh man, they're thinking this about us. They're thinking this. I'm like, nah, bro, like they like you. They're our friends, bro. Like we're talking about like literal
they're our friends. Yeah. They're our friends. But they think they got an edge. I can see it in their fucking face. Right? And like, hey, I want you to think that, because like you see me going wide, but really I'm just taking that turn on the inside, bitch. And you don't even see it coming, bro. Right? Like, and like, I'd never tear anybody down, but I just want to like compete. And like, there are some guys that have been in this a little bit longer than us that, like they are our friends, but they also, you can just tell internally, they got the same chip on their shoulder that like they gotta step on us, and that they're doing it better. And I'm just like, man, I love that, because I can stay underwater a little bit longer than you, buddy. And when I come up out of here, like, You know what I mean? Like it's that's
that competitiveness nature. You have to, man. Like,
but that can also your self-inducing pressure, and pressure's a good thing until pressure breaks something, right? Until pressure blows up a motor or blows up your day. So like you have to navigate it. But like it's interesting when you say like you'll take a day with how you do it. I'll have days, man, where like it might be similar to you, but a little bit different. But I'll have days where like we could be in the middle of a day or beginning of a day, who knows? But like something might get me, or a meeting, having to let someone go, something, and I can tell it's kind of like affecting what I'm doing. And something I've got better at is like, you know what, man, I'm not going to lose my shit and be talking about this for a week. But you know what I am going to do? Hey, I'm good for the day. I'm just going to feel this and let it kind of like take its course versus trying to push it. And then I end up just bitching about it for a week. I'm just going to feel it. And like, I remember there was one time I told Eli, I was like, hey bro, I'm going to go grab a fucking hotel room on the way home. Like I'm good. I'm done for the day. I go and take a fucking nap at a hotel room, like fucking shower, literally to myself, get over myself for 2 hours, go home, enjoy the family. Like that reset was important. I need them less and less, but I think it's important, like you say, just being open and honest. And hey, if you're feeling it, feel it. But then, and hey, people are supportive of that, but then you've got the integrity to, hey, you're doing what you need to do to get back in the game. No, you're not allowing, people's support, and you're open and honesty. You're not allowing that to like turn into this like self-victimization where it drags on for a month and then everyone has to drag you through fucking life. It's like, no, you have the integrity coupled with it to, hey, I'm feeling this. This is where I'm at. But then you're also doing everything you need to do with, on that day, whether it's rest, a cold shower, a walk, to like put yourself back into the fight as soon as possible.
But I think self-awareness is key. Again, like as we grow, even in business, it's being self-aware. Okay, what are your triggers? What are things going to set you off? Right? How do you handle them? And I think that's a part of growth. Like it's a big, big part of growing as a human being, but also on the entrepreneurial side. Because again, like I'm just like you, man. Like I got that trigger. It'll set me off. And again, like that's my routine. Is like everyone's, well, what do you do that for? Because it sets me up on the attack for the day. Like I'm not sitting back passively and allowing the day to come to me. For me, it's like getting on the aggressive. Okay, what am I going to deal with mentally, internally? And what am I going to deal with from the exterior too? What is going to come my way that day? And I found through coming at that perspective, like if I'm dialed in my routine, man, things don't bother me as much. Yeah, I still get fired up, and I'm the same way, like competitiveness aspect of it. And like, fuck these guys, and I got, these guys over here. And it's like, you know what?
But in a productive way.
In a productive way. And it's allowed me to handle things so much better. Relationship things, things with my son. It's put me in a better mindset internally to be able to handle the external things that come my way. And again, it comes with self-awareness. Like you have to recognize who you are. You have to be honest with yourself. And again, if you need to do things like that, that's like stopping at a hotel. Again, that comes from self-awareness. Like how can I handle this situation?
Like self-awareness, but then just giving yourself a little grace. Cause you might, a lot of people might, like have that self-awareness, but then there's judgment or just reluctancy to like doing what they have to do to just process that. So like, like you talk about how important like your wife is, like, well, that's how important Eli is for me. Right. Cause if I do that, he's like, yeah, bro, awesome. No judgment, no nothing. Cause he knows like, hey, that dude, like I push a lot of like performance and motivation and really helping folks. And there's a lot of great stuff that comes from that, but I naturally just run a little hotter in order to accomplish all of that. So sometimes like, a little cool down is needed. And, a question I have for you, man, if it's okay, it might be a little personal, but it's also like just toward the masses, like, that gentleman from Ellen DeGeneres just committed suicide. Twitch, right? And then like every time someone like decides to do that, we always see on social media like, hey, tell people you love them, reach out, check up on people, and I agree. But and I don't know, but part of me is curious about like, man, like we just got to do better and asking people, and then but they look so happy, and I just wonder like, people that are in that phase, and I guess you can only speak for yourself, right? But when we always say like, hey, reach out, check up on people, like, do those people even necessarily like want help or want attention or like, you know what I mean? Like, cause it's one thing to like, I feel like we're one dimensional with suicide. It's that we didn't reach out. We didn't tell people we loved them. We didn't check on them. So like they just got deeper and deeper and deeper. And then they decided to do it. And it's like, man, nothing is ever just one dimensional, right? Like, could people seriously just not want any help, and then, hey, on the surface they look okay? Is that possible? Or, I mean, do you have any like any of your own personal perspective on like what kind of got you through that?
I do think we look at it extremely one-dimensional. I think that's a big issue in this country. There's so many things that can be done, like in the perception of suicide. And I think, again, it's taking aware of your surroundings, like, you know, having tough conversations. But again, like, even in that situation, like where somebody might seem super happy, like, man, people looked at me and like, I looked happy too, like in the exterior. But again, like, conversations help. But I think it's in what we're doing here is like, I'm trying to create a guys' night. You know, and I have a guys' night where I get all these guys, you know, we come in, we get a workout in, we sit around and talk about our feelings. And I think, again, like it's allowing for me, what I've seen is just being more open and honest about my struggles and getting that out there. And it's not necessarily like, hey, how are you doing? I think if more people were open and honest just in general about, hey, like, I'm struggling too. Like, this is what I go through. That opens up the door for conversation. I think not enough people are having that conversation. Like, it's
so
not
you're talking like
hey,
preventative maintenance almost, right? Like you're getting people
like,
to reduce the pressure before it gets so bad. Now it's just a matter of time.
And I think, you know, at that point when somebody's that bad, and here's my perspective on it, like they're already really at that lowest point. And it could be just a conversation like, hey, how you doing? Like, listen, I'm here for you. The problem is when you're in that position on the other side of it, you don't want to burden anybody. You don't want that. And that's that internalization of it. Like, you feel like you're burdening people with your problems and I talked about it the other day. And as men, we feel like we compare our stories to everybody else's. Mm-hmm. Like, my story might not be as bad, so I don't feel like I need to share it, or I don't have it as bad. And we internalize that shit. And I think that's a big problem for men, especially because we don't want to burden other people, but we're also comparing these stories and saying, well, I don't have it as bad as him, so we'll just internalize that. And maybe I'm just being soft, or, and that's a big, big issue. And I think, again, like when we do that kind of stuff, man, we bury it deep, and that's where the real struggles come from. And I think in general, just having a conversation, like talking to somebody, it goes a long way, because when you get it out, like every time I share my story, like every time I say anything about my day when I'm struggling, man, it's a big healer for me. And as much as people want to say like those conversations, they might not help, I think that they can extremely help, like immensely with somebody. And it's really not, maybe not even the conversation, but it's just somebody showing that they care. Mm-hmm. And
agreed.
They know that they're not alone.
Yeah. And I agree. And like, it's hard to hear sometimes, because like you hear about, Twitch committing suicide, and everybody online is like, hey, tell people you love them, check up on people. And I just kind of like pause, and I'm looking at that, and I've heard that, 1,000 times, and it's not that that's wrong, right? But I've heard that, and then like all I could think about was like, hey man, is that kind of insinuating that like his wife and family weren't doing that for him? Like,
yeah, that's,
you know what I mean? Because it's like, hey, maybe correct. maybe she was,
right. Like
maybe the dude was like literally just telling everyone he was good, because like that was just him, and he didn't necessarily want help or didn't feel help, or maybe he just felt like he was actually doing the right thing by not being here. You know what I mean? Like it's so hard to look at, and like everyone is so quick when something happens to say, oh, well, check up on people. And it's like, man, like that's just, I guess just personally was insinuating on my perspective that his wife
maybe his family parents
wasn't, weren't checking up on him. I don't know. Like I think some things, just sexuality, different things run deeper to where like someone's just not going to fucking open up. I don't know, but I like what you talk about when it comes to
I think you're absolutely spot on with it. Like some people just aren't going to open up, and they are where they are in their battle. And guess what? You're not going to get much from them. And that's it. And that's where they're at. And I think that those are the serious cases in the sense. So like I said, they're already in that mode, man. And there's just absolutely, again, you look at like, and I hate to use this, like people who are in substance abuse and things like that, you have to want help first. Like you have to want help or crave that help, because a lot of the times when those conversations and people say, well, you should talk to somebody, it's because those people do want help, and that can absolutely save somebody. Yeah. But guess what? If somebody's in that mode where they don't want help, I'm sorry to say it, there's nothing you can do.
And it just gives us,
unless something life.
And this is where like just in business, in life, with friendships, like I'm very focused on just doing all I can, because that'll influence the best outcome possible per se, right? But we also have to understand that with relationships. But when people just say like, reach out, check in on someone, it's like, hey, you're giving this impression that if someone would have done that, this would not have happened. And that's not true. Like, you don't have control over any of that. At best, we have some influence. So it's just more focus on just doing all we can for each other, understanding, that, hey, that might influence the tide, but it's not this sole proprietor that's going to necessarily like change that, and I think I just get a little bothered because, and we've had military guys, man, we've had Marines, I've had friends, commit suicide. And so I think that it does kind of pick a scab on me a little bit because it's a little close to home. And when you see people posting, like, I know it's with the best of intention, but it's like you're posting that like if somebody would have just said something to him, he'd be here. And it's like, man, if it were that fucking simple, like, and it's also just important and healthy to just understand, hey, we've got influence. We don't have control over any of that stuff, man. Like,
well, I think it's critical, man, that guys like you sharing your story, bro. If like what I would think if I were in that state, right? I don't know if someone checking up on me would help, but me listening to a story like you, where you were in this space and this is how you were feeling and this is how you came out of it. And man, you weren't even in that space. Like, you went there. Like, that would be so much more impactful for me. But that's another thing. I feel like with as many people probably deal with this story, you rarely hear the actual story like we just heard it from you.
And like, I think it's important when you say you wanted help, like, and man, not to just focus.
I wanted help once thank God I got to that point. But again, I was in that boat too. Like, dude, I don't think there's anything that anybody could have said to me at that point that would have pulled me out of that. Like, there wasn't, because a lot of people tried. I think they tried, quote unquote, but man, I was already there.
Yep.
It was already in my head. It was a conscious thought every day I woke up. And I'm sorry to say, like, one conversation probably wasn't going to help.
Right.
And
it was was it just spiraling from
somebody I looked up to?
And from your father's death, did you lose your father, like, if you don't mind me asking, unexpectedly or just abruptly? And it wasn't like,
well, he woke up in the middle of the night and I got a phone call. It was probably about 3 a.m. and I woke up like an hour before. I got a call at like 3:40 in the morning, saying it's your dad, and he's at the hospital. I'm like, oh, what's wrong? He's like, oh, it's his heart. I thought nothing of it. My dad was a monster, man. He was in great shape. He worked out every day. So I'm like, all right, it's his heart. So I, kind of got up, got dressed, drove to the hospital casually, and I walked in, and I'll never forget. I looked at my aunt was there, my cousin. My cousin's hands were buried. The head was buried in his hands, and my aunt started walking towards me. Yeah, and I'll never forget, man. She walked at me, and I was like, no. Like, she was already like trying to embrace me, and I just couldn't fucking believe it. I was like, not a chance. And they got up in the middle of the night and went to grab some Tylenol. And he just dropped. He had a brain aneurysm. He's 52 years old.
Oh man,
that was it. That was it, man. I think like I relive all these moments with him, man. It's like all these moments of things that I could have done or would have done, and we weren't on the best terms when he passed. Just all these things, man. It's just like, and you constantly, again, you talk about these struggles, and that's where it all comes from. Like a lot of that, it's just like all these moments that I could have done something or I could have been different, and. And it's just things that he, and like I said, I don't think there's one fucking conversation in the world that can make me feel better from that shit. It had to come from within. And that's the reality of it, man. I had to dig deep, and I had to like forgive myself for that, cause I know he would have forgiven me in a heartbeat, but like I had to forgive myself for it.
Dude, what's crazy about being a father, right? Is like, how your dad would forgive you in a heartbeat and your dad already knew better even when you were going through it, is because you're a dad and you'd forgive your son in a fucking heartbeat. And when your son's going through something in life and you've already been through it, like you see what he's going through and life is just bigger than that, and he's going to come around and he'll be good to go. And as fathers, we see that, and we would give that forgiveness in a heartbeat because we've lived it. We know better. But when we think of it to ourselves, toward our own father, it's hard. You know what I mean?
We wear a heavy burden in that sense, man. You talk about guilt and all these things, like, whether it be not showing up for people or people counting on you. And I think that we hold this weight on our shoulder. And at the end of the day, man, like, we got to forgive ourselves too and understand, like, people are going to go through these things in life. We're all understanding. And like, for some reason, we hold ourselves to like a standard of we have to be perfect. Well, we don't hold everybody else that standard because we know not everybody's perfect. But why do we do that to ourselves? Like, why do we beat up on ourselves? And like, if you're a person like me, man, I already beat the shit out of myself. So anything I don't do during the day, like, man, I'm already beating myself up. Like, if I don't get this workout and if I don't do this, like, I'm already beating myself up. So like, when I feel like I let somebody down,
yeah, that's even worse,
dude. It's the hardest burden you can wear.
Yeah,
it's the worst feeling in the world is letting people down.
But when you've got grace, right? Like, it's so cool, man, when you can have a circle, you know, of just like on Thanksgiving, I had somebody give me a little bit of grace. There's this family I've known for like a decade, man, and the daughter, who's closer to my age, but she's not a mom, right? And I've known her parents for like a decade. They go to the same gym that I go to. Good folks. Well, she had, unbeknownst to me, she had just the daughter, who's, you know, in her mid-20s. She had just had hip surgery or something, and she was just getting back into the gym. And I had just lost my mom the day before. And man, she kind of looked at me and said something at the gym when I was saying hi to her. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I was like, what? And I kind of walked up to her and I was like, are you good? What are you talking about? Or why would you want to come across me a certain way? And like, I think I was just edgy, man. And like losing my mom, you know, the day prior, you know, but I just kind of came at her that it didn't scare her like I was going to hurt her, but she was just in her first day back at the gym for 3 months. So she's probably a little wobbly with her own perception on how she's, you know, how people are seeing her and whatnot. And I just, man, I kind of made her cry in the gym because she never thought that I would think something like that she would ever want to hurt my feelings or something. And months go by, a new gym opens up closer to the house. So I'm going to that one, and she starts going there with her mom. And, you know, I'm like, all right, you know, I've been thinking about it for a couple months, and I just went up to her mom and just, hey, sorry. I said it to her mom first, you know, and then her daughter was there, and I just said, you know, I got to be better, you know. And she's like, well, yeah, like you know, like we've known you for a decade, and you were just kind of like attacking her verbally, you know, like, and not like yelling at her, but just kind of like confrontation. And the confrontation was like me being insulted by her, but really was there just something deeper, right? And then she was kind of in her own world, and I said, look, at the end of the day, man, like I'm a father now, so I see that, hey, this is your kid. If my kid were at the gym, and you know, and I just said, hey, look, I gotta be better, you know, and I apologize for that. And you know, like instantly, you know, like her mom just understood, and even she apologized. That's how I knew it was her first day back in the gym. Was right at that moment. She's like, hey, that was my first day back, and maybe I did come off to you a certain way, and you know, I'm sorry. But it was just like, man, it was just probably a bad day for me, right? And like, and you're just kind of like rough around the edges. But for someone to just forgive you, that you've known for 10 years, you've known their family and stuff, and you just kind of butt heads, and for them to just understand you're not trying to make an excuse, you're just kind of voicing why the day was a little rough and how that kind of affected you, but hey, I apologize. And for someone to just give some grace back, like, that's cool, man. I always try to give that grace to folks and be more, like, I'm hard on people, but I'm very understanding and forgiving at the same time. But, you know, grace is a really cool thing when it's given, like genuinely, like just given to you. It also just, when you feel it from someone, it also like solidifies how important it is to just really try to do your best to give that to people as well. You know what I mean? Like, because you might not think it's a big deal when you're giving grace, and you might not realize how much of an impact that can have for someone. But when we talk about just running hot and needing resets, like, it's nice to just have, if anything, it makes you better. You know, like, you're less stressed.
Like, imagine like just how good it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And how good does it make you feel to forgive somebody? I mean, you talk about stress in your life, man, you hold on to a lot of shit, like, at the end of the day, and the more of that stuff you hold on to, the heavier that's going to be. So like, allowing yourself grace for yourself, but yet giving grace to other people, like forgiving people and moving on. Like, it takes so much more effort to hold on to negative energy, to hold on to that animosity towards people and not forgive people, instead of just saying, you know what, hey, you don't have to like somebody. Like, man, if they do you wrong, like, it is what it is. Like, trust me, like, I've battled that shit all the time. But like, at the end of the day, if you just say, you know what, hey, listen, I forgive you, I'm moving on. Like, you don't have to move on with me. Like, it's just one of those things. I forgive you.
Let it go.
Like, I don't necessarily, we don't have to be in a relationship here. I don't have to do this, that, but I forgive you. We're moving on. I'm moving on with my life. And then, like, it's like this weight off your shoulder. Imagine how good you feel if you just start loading that down. I mean, at the end of the day, just giving grace to people. Now, there's certain circumstances. Yeah. Hold on to that shit. They don't deserve it. But for the most part, You know, like for the most part, it's just one of those things. Like it's not worth it, man. Like life's too short.
Yeah.
It is.
Question for you, life and business, but as you've grown, as you started taking these different leaps, you know, like you talk about like battling some of your demons and just life. Have you ever had points where like you just felt like, you know, like, hey, why me? Like, why am I getting all of these things? And is there any like self-worth issues there? And like, have you ever hit a phase of like just having to like give yourself permission to just allow yourself to have these things? If that makes sense.
Oh yeah. Again, I'm a big faith-driven guy through everything I've gone to. I truly believe like I shouldn't be here. Like at the end of the day, man, I shouldn't be here. Granted, I was never in Boy Scouts, can't tie a rope for shit. Derek White had made a joke the other night in our guys' night. So I'm reusing that. Like, and it's funny, like I've told this story so many times, it's healing. Sometimes I get super emotional about it. Sometimes when people like you can talk about it, like, yeah, because I've shared it so many times, but like when I think about it, man, like I just, you know, where I'm at in life, I struggle with that self-worth, that self-value, but through faith and everything else, man, I look at it and it's like, why me? Why me? Like, why do I deserve this? How do I have this life? Everything I've done to people in this life, everything I've done, like, I don't deserve this shit. And that's another thing I battle. Like, again, it's one of my demons. Like, it's like that you're not good enough. You don't bring any value, you know, and all these things. And that's like, for me, my biggest self-satisfaction in combating that is doing things, whether it be the helping people, having conversations with random people at the gas stations. That's how I live my life now, because at the end of the day, man, like as selfishly, it helps me move on. It helps me be a better person, but it makes me feel good. And it also helps other people. So like, that's where I get my value, sadly enough.
Yeah. And dude, it helps a ton.
Me so much, man.
Well, think about it from business. It
helps me so much.
Like when we think about like Sal and Andy Frisella, right? And you start talking to them about business and whatnot. And they're like, hey, yep, I got you. Let's sit down. And then they tell you like, you're like, how fortunate would we all be if they sat down at our table and we're like, hey, Eli, check it out. Here's the 40 things not to do the first 2 years, right? Yep. Like, and you're like, man, I appreciate it so much. Like, thank you. Like, how'd you figure this out? Well, because I fucked it all up myself. Okay. But now I have the experience to not only tell you what not to do, but how to navigate and keep you away from it. Brock, when we look at it from a business standpoint, we're very thankful. And then I'm sure those guys are very proud to be that person, correct? But if you flip it to life, hey man, you're no different than that, but in life. Like you can literally like do the same thing for people from the life perspective. And like, man, like how do you know that stuff or how do you navigate it? Because I fucking did it, motherfucker.
Yeah,
like,
I did it.
So not only can I, prevent you from doing some things, but I can also just give you some, some measures, to just kind of steer you away from it. And I don't mean just suicide, but just, dude, stress in general, right? Like if you've been to the bottom of stress, if you've been to the bottom of pressure, if you've been to the bottom of, self-worth, then pretty much anything from people, minorly dealing with it all the way to severely dealing with it, you're now able to be that vehicle to be a resource for people, just like Sal and Andy are a resource for dudes in business, right? So like there is a ton of fucking self-worth there that you can just kind of be that lighthouse, right? For folks at any level of that, because you've gone through it.
And that's what I try to do. Like, again, like it helps me personally, but it also helps a lot of other people. And, from sharing my stories, I think that it's helped me become a better coach. Like, I think that I'm where I'm at as a coach because of everything I've gone through. And like, even as a person, like I wouldn't change anything I've gone through. People like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry you've had to go through things. Like, I'm not. It's made me who I am. Like I own the shit out of my story. Like, and I have no problem telling people what my story is. But again, like it's helped me be more relatable social media wise, but it's also helped me be a fucking unbelievable coach to my athletes because guess what? I give a shit about them as human beings.
That's where the change is, bro. There's a gym on every block. Okay. There's a gym on every block and people know enough about the basic fundamentals. So then why don't they do it? Life, right? Like just like the same in real estate, bro. Like we're at like 100 realtors now. And if I like 1 out of every 20 questions I get has very little to do with the real estate contract or anything in real estate. It's got more to do with like what they're dealing with themselves, their insecurities, their lack of confidence, their own stressors, like whatever it is, it's always self. There's something I'm helping them with there that, hey, you might like not be negotiating something well, and that might be the symptom, but the root cause is some other shit with yourself or abuse you've gone through that makes it hard for you even to speak to a middle-aged man and give him advice, right? Because of your fault, whatever it is, right? Like typically what surfaces is a symptom. It's not, right? Like it's not root cause, and like it's all people, man. It's all, but through hearing your story, bro, I'm starting to figure out real quick that like these 500-pound one-legged lunges aren't heavy at all for you.
No,
right?
That stuff's the easy stuff for me, man. And like, again, like I do that shit because there's so much internally. Like to me, that's the easy shit. Like the life on the external part of that's where the hard shit starts. Like it's those demons, those battles, and like. Every now and then I'll stop and think, like, even the weight stuff, I'm pretty humble about that. Like, yeah, am I strong? There's a lot of other guys out there that are stronger than I am. Like, I love doing that shit.
No, there's not.
Well, it's even like, and then I look at life, man, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, my struggles are hard, but guess what? I'm doing all right, man. Like every now and then I give myself a little bit of grace. I'm like, you know what? You're doing pretty good. You're doing all right with yourself. And that, to me, it's a feel good moment. It doesn't happen a ton, but like, it's nice to have conversations like this with people, because then in opening up and talking about it, then you realize like, hey man, I'm doing all right. I'm making an impact on a lot of different lives. And I think you'll probably say the same thing, that like with what you guys are doing, you're helping people business-wise, real estate. I think that's great. But what for you guys would be more powerful? Is it somebody coming in and sharing one of those stories where you help them with something personal versus business? I mean, to me, I can help an athlete make it to the NFL. That's great. But if I can help him with something before that aspect of it, whether it be, in his personal life that helps him become a better human being, or help him with a struggle, man, I'll take that right side any day.
And usually it's hand in hand. Usually it's hand in hand, man. Like out of everybody we've had significant influence on that has really, overcome a lot to get a house here, or just all the agents that are a part of our network that we're training and developing and watching them grow and build their own business. Very rarely, if any, I can't remember. I don't know if Eli can remember any, but very rarely where we've had just great impact, it wasn't personal and business in this two in the same.
Well, all the answers are out there, and that's like one thing that we joke about a lot is, hey, Google the shit, guys. Like, like, man, how you say, I love hearing you say you're not naturally good at business. For as well as we've done in business, I feel like very similar. Like, man, I got to figure shit out. Like, I'm not a natural numbers dude. I don't naturally like do all this shit that I hear a lot of other people doing, but we figure it out. But with all the answers being out there, it's like it comes down to just the personal side. Hey, if you're not doing certain things, hey, we know we need to eat fewer calories than we burn, right?
Fuck.
Or we need to burn more calories than we eat, right? We know that.
Yeah, you're fucked, Will.
If we're not if we're not doing that, what else is it? And that's what we see in business. It's always some personal shit.
And just like you say, the self-awareness, to have that. But moving forward, man, just before we get you out of here, I'm sure you got some squats to hit or whatnot. Like, any insight on like 2023? How's the gym going? What are you guys up to? Like any plans that you guys having moving forward? And obviously we'll put your social medias into the links on the podcast as well, so people can know where to find you and follow you.
Honestly, 2023 is just growing more of this. I think down the road, we'd obviously love to expand, but it's just really building what we have here. We've had an extremely special community, and I think it's starting there. We're not where we want to be again, in the business side of things. We've not even marketed yet here. It's all been word of mouth. And again, like we've got no time. It's Britt and I. We have 2 independent contracted trainers, and we're just running. I'd like to allow us a little more time to focus on marketing, bring more people in again. But like for us, growing as a person, like that's, to me, everything else will fall into place, man. I don't care. Business side of it, it'll all happen. Like I have the belief, but it all starts with me. And again, like I know it's cliche, man. I just want to be a better human being. Like I want to be better for myself, be a better father, better husband, better coach. And in doing that, all those things. And guess what? I'm investing in myself in all the different avenues. And for me, that's the most important dynamic. And again, like I said, just growing this place and doing big things. Like we had a hell of a year, a lot of athletes, a lot of successful athletes, a lot of great member stories. But again, it's growing that and building it into even more special. And then again, I want to continue to share my story. I think that's my next step is I want to have more of an impact as a coach is great. What we got going on here. I think that my purpose and everything I've been through, I think there's a bigger platform to me to help more people. And for me, that's a number one priority in helping myself and doing all that. I want to help more and more people with my story. I think it's too impactful not to.
Yeah, it's fun to hear you say that, man, because I think a lot of us that even know you a little bit. Because I think if, in addition to, your impressive workouts and everything else, I think one of your superpowers is that you're approachable. And you're approachable because you're honest. Like when you're honest about your story, when you're honest about your struggles, it makes everyone else around you okay to be okay with theirs, at least with you. Maybe not with their wife, maybe not with their team or other people that can make it difficult, but when they're around you, and you're an open book and you're strong, with your command presence and your scars and so open, like it just makes it more comfortable for whoever you're around to be honest, with theirs. Right. And like part of leadership, man, is like being approachable, being able to embrace people, but just letting it happen so naturally where people want to be around you, or whether you're hard on them or not, they know that you got their back. And they know that you're going to help them out, even if it's a hard conversation. Like that's a great trait as a parent. It's also a great trait as a leader, man. If people have to question how you feel about them day to day based off of whether they're, doing something or not, or struggling in life or not, if they're questioning your support for them or how you feel about them, it makes it very hard for them to open up, correct? So you being able to open up with yours gives others permission to open up with theirs, which literally cuts the fat right off the bone and lets you get right to the fucking meat of what's going on, so we can actually be fucking productive at a consistent level, right? So super, super cool, man. Just pleasure talking with you, dude. Like, with my mom passing, this past year, a couple months ago, I struggle a little bit with some things, and it's just hard. Like I remember she was coming off of the chemo. And it just wasn't working, man. We're going to maybe try some different stuff. And she was pretty far along at that point. And so she's coming off the chemo. And like the one benefit was that the chemo, not being on it, was going to like let her immune system come back a little bit so she could actually travel, right? Because the 2 years she had, once she got diagnosed, it was stage 4 already, right? And had metastasized or whatever. And so she couldn't, not only did she have a low immune system, but it was COVID. So like, it's like a double negative. You can't go anywhere, and my mom always loved to travel. She always wanted his family to go on like a cruise. It's other bullshit. And they did. My mom and dad traveled. They had fun. And I was always grinding and working and doing my thing. And my sisters are cool, but not that cool. Like if I'm around them too long, it just gets me edgy.
I feel that.
Right. So like there's some of that. And like my mom always wanted to go to Hawaii and stuff, man. And just we never quite put it together. And so when she was coming off of chemo, financially, I'm in a place where, I just told my sister, I was like, look, man, I'm going to pay for you and our other sister and dad and mom to just go. And I'm not sure if I can make the trip or not. We got a lot going on, but at least get mom there. And so she was, but then she ended up like getting worse. She was turning septic and stuff, man. So she ended up going to the hospital. Eli, what was that, like 2 days before they were supposed to leave?
Right before it, yep.
Day before they were supposed to leave. She never made it out of the hospital. And like, I don't struggle terribly bad with like not getting her to Hawaii, but like a little, right? Because it was like, fuck, man, like, right there. You know what I mean? Like, right there. And like, I had the money, and I was in a place in life where like I could pay for everybody to go in like first class, direct, whatever it was needed, and like never quite made it. And my sister and her husband, they did a cool thing. They decorated her room like Hawaii, which was like super cool. And but it's like, bummer, like, and I don't think I could have done anything different or done it any sooner, because the second we found out she was sick, it was during COVID. So like there was just, like she wanted to do everything she could. So there was just no option until it got so bad she was off chemo. But then you think about like, well, even before she was diagnosed, like I was still making decent money. Could I have sent her prior to? But like, you just don't know what you don't know, man. Like you're just doing all you can with what you have. And like, now that we have kids, it's like, I know the grace I would give my kids. I don't, you know what I mean? Like of just doing the best you can with what you have. But like, when you talked about some of your dad, like with me, it was like, man, I had my mom like right there, like, but if you just see it from tunnel vision and not the bigger picture of all the memories and the totality of like, cause the totality of life with my mom, we had a couple little bumps in the road and arguments and whatnot, but like the totality of like my life with my mom, I can't just like not remember that because she was a day from, Hawaii, right? Like that just wouldn't do anything. But I know what you mean about letting something eat at you. You know what I mean?
That's
just,
hard, man.
and then once someone's passed, it's like, hey man, like there's no getting that back. There's no redo. You know, like
you don't get any of those opportunities back. And I think that's the hardest thing that eats us.
But I think that's perspective, right? That's life. As we grow, as we get wiser, how we handle our kids, and we take advantage of every opportunity possible. I don't think you really understand that and really turn that gear on until you have, you know, some perspectives. And I think like our parents got it because they lost their parents or they had something go wrong.
Yeah.
And I did have my mom, like I'm a pretty spiritual dude, but I'm still confused about religion and faith and where we go. And I feel like we go somewhere, but like, fuck man, how do you even figure that out? Right. Like I'm still eating turkey toms, bro. And I'm supposed to figure out heaven. Like, I don't know, but there was a couple things that like happened the evening on the morning my mom passed away. And she just kind of let me know she was there. And I'm a guy that's like, shit's just ironic. Nothing just, I don't, everything happens for a reason. Like, yeah. But then also some shit's ironic. Like if Eli's phone falls off the table, he probably bumped it. You know what I mean? Like I don't get too crazy, but, and I don't know about you, like with your dad, but some things happen in my house, you know, since my mom passed and like, they're there, bro.
He sends me signs all the time, man.
Yeah.
And whether it be the St. Louis Blues posting something about like when he had a few records and like, he always has a way. Number one is showing me he was better than me. Always. But again, like I wake up, man, and it's reminding me every single day when I look at Britt, my son. Like those are my two angels, man.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that he sent them to me, you know, and I know he knew I needed them, and they changed my life. Like I have a reminder that he's with me every day. I have a reminder that he forgives me. I have a reminder that he's there, man, and it's through them. And
yeah, it's cool,
again,
right?
He's put certain people, you know, from my past in his life here, and it's just everywhere I look, he's around, and it's just it's there. And I'm sure your mom's the same way. You just gotta,
dude. I find myself having more conversations with my mom now. And don't get me wrong, I talk to my mom at least every week, you know, when she was alive and whatnot. Even when she was healthy, we typically kept in touch. But like the interesting part is like once they kind of send you a couple signs that they're there, it's like, man, I have to learn how to have my mom from a different dimension now, right? But she's there. But like what's crazy is I feel like she's watching over me, and I feel like whenever I want to talk to her, I don't got to call or get a call back. I don't have to try. Like I can literally be in the shower and just close my eyes and just say something, and I know it's heard, and we end up getting pregnant. And we did the math because I'm so fucking good at math, right? Like we have another son, another boy due early March, and just with like a lot of, you know, and like, you know, man, you're married, you get it, dude. When you're working and grinding business, and then, you know, your mom's health isn't best, like there might be one or two fornications in a month, maybe, right? Like, cause there's just shit going on. And the one time we did was either the day before or I'm pretty sure it was the day before my mom passed. And it was that time. And then at least a month prior to that, that was the only time we did. And we ended up getting, you know, so we were pregnant. And when we found out we were pregnant, and, you know, they measure, and it's like, hey, you're 9 weeks pregnant. And well, the only time we had been intimate within those 9 weeks was the day before my mom passed. And it's like, fuck, you know, and it's a little boy and my mom, like, yeah, it's so like, it's just bigger than us, right? Like it, yeah, I don't know. It's just fun to bond with you on some of this stuff, man. Like, again, you're so approachable, you know, and just things resonate.
I just feel it too. Like even talking about that, man, like I feel it. Like, you know, talking about that stuff, like it hits me too. Like it's, again, I think that the more people we come in contact who have scars and stuff, it just, I don't say they're better people, but they're just more relatable, man. Cause like, I feel like I have more grace towards other people through everything I've gone through. I'm more understanding. And to be honest, like I try and have more conversations with people, just from the gas station to here. Man, it's hard not to live life, to just appreciate people, to appreciate life on a daily basis when you go through hardships.
But still getting after it. This is what I love about your content on your Instagram is like you give people grace and forgiveness, yet.
Oh yeah.
But you're not giving them an excuse.
I'll motherfuck somebody later on too.
Right? But the thing is, like, man, it's so important. Like, especially as leaders, like it's good to give people grace. It's good to give people permission to feel, but we're not giving them an excuse to not get after it, though.
No.
You know what I mean?
No, because at the end of the day, you only have one option in life, man. That's it. You want to live a good life, you got to show up. You got to answer the bell. And that's the only way. Because if you don't fucking answer the bell, guess what? You're either going to quit, which is unfortunate, what happens to a lot of people, and in every circumstance different, or you're going to keep moving. All right. And that's it. You answer the bell, you show up every day. And that's what I try to do every day. I just try and show up. I answer the bell and I get ready to go. Whether it be a good day or a bad day.
Mm-hmm. That's where we end it right there, man. I think that's the title of the podcast is Showing Up with Brock Wilson.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Love it.
I like it.
Hang out for.
Don't answer. Don't answer the door. But
hang out for a sec, Brock. We're gonna throw. Hell yeah, we're gonna throw some outro music here for a sec, Brock. So hang out for us, and we'll get this out of here. But everybody, you guys know where to find us: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Throw a Brock a follow. It's at Brock Wilson 25.
Wilson B 25.
Yes, and we'll throw the links in the podcast so people have it. But Brock, such a pleasure, bro. We're gonna kick some music and we'll be right back at you. For everyone else, we will. We'll see you guys soon.
I'ma slip it on down and turn it up. Southbound.